They said Barrett Kensington was blind. All of Chicago believed it. His wife told the partners, told the press, told every vulture circling his empire that Barrett Kensington was nothing but a body sitting in a dark mansion, waiting to die. But there was one thing nobody knew. Barrett heard everything. Every secret phone call his wife made to her lover, every dollar drained from the company accounts, and every word she called him useless cripple when she thought he couldn't hear. Barrett wasn't blind. Barrett was waiting. And the only person he trusted to turn it all around was a poor girl from Detroit that everyone looked down on, a girl named Kira Dawson. If this story touched your heart, hit the like button to support us. Share this video with someone who needs to hear this story. And subscribe to our channel so you never miss the next one. Kira Dawson was 27 years old, and she'd been used to counting every penny since she was 16. Every morning, she woke up at 5 o'clock in a cramped rented room on the outskirts of Chicago, where the sound of the train rattled the thin walls. She worked the morning shift at a laundromat on Clark Street, ironing every shirt, folding every bedsheet. Her hands blistered from the heat, but she never complained. Every weekend, she went to the post office to send money back to Detroit for her mother and younger sister. Patty, her mother, had once been a cheerful woman before life spun her around like a top. She was addicted to online shopping, buying things she didn't need, paying with money she didn't have, and little by little, the credit card debt piled on top of the rent debt. Josie, Kira's younger sister, was 19, gentle, bright in school, dreaming of going to nursing school. But where would the money come from when the whole family was sinking in debt? Kira carried it all. She carried it not because anyone forced her to, but because she knew that if she didn't carry it, no one else could. 3 months before Kira left Detroit for Chicago, her father, Frank Dawson, had died. Frank was addicted to gambling. He owed a large sum of money to a group of loan sharks, more than he could ever repay in a lifetime as a factory worker. One night, that group came to the house to collect the debt and threatened the whole family. Frank blocked the doorway, pushed Patty and Josie behind him, and told them to run and call the police. By the time the police arrived, Frank had been badly injured in the struggle. He died on the way to the hospital. Kira was working the night shift at the factory then. She got Josie's call at 3 o'clock in the morning, her little sister's voice choking, able to say only one sentence. "Sis, Dad's gone." Kira didn't make it in time to see her father one last time. She didn't even get the chance to tell him that no matter how angry she was at him for the gambling, for the debts, for dragging the whole family down into the mud, she still loved him. Frank was gone, but the debt stayed behind. 2 weeks after the funeral, the loan sharks came back. This time, it wasn't at night. In broad daylight, 2 large men stood in front of the house, arms crossed over their chests, watching Patty tremble behind the screen door. Kira had just come home from work. She saw her mother shrinking into the corner of the kitchen, Josie standing in front of her, her face pale. Kira walked straight to the door. She stood facing the leader, a man taller than her by a full head, and looked him directly in the eyes. "My father is dead," Kira said, her voice steady even though her heart was pounding like it wanted to break. "What are you going to take from a dead man? I'll pay, every penny. But if you touch my mother or my sister one more time, I'll go straight to the police station and tell them everything. Every loan, every threat, every name. Do you want your money, or do you want trouble?" The leader stared at Kira, a skinny 27-year-old woman standing in the doorway of a run-down house, with no weapon, no one backing her up, only a pair of eyes that refused to lower. He looked at her for a long moment, then gave a small nod. 2 weeks, he said. "If I don't see money in 2 weeks, I'm coming back." They got in their car and drove away. Kira stood watching until the car disappeared completely. Then she stepped back inside, shut the door, and sank down onto the kitchen floor. Her hands were shaking. Her whole body was shaking. She hugged her knees, bit down hard on her lip, and wouldn't let herself cry. Josie sat down beside her, wrapped her arms around her, and said nothing. After a while, Kira lifted her head, looked at her sister, and whispered, "Don't be scared. I'll handle it." That night, Kira lay in bed, staring up at the cracked ceiling, and made a decision. She would leave Detroit. She would go anywhere there was work that paid enough to repay the debt, enough for Josie to go to school, enough for Patty to stop living in fear. She didn't know where that place was. She only knew she had to go. 1 week later, Kira arrived in Chicago with $300 in her pocket, 1 small suitcase, and no one she knew. She rented the cheapest room she could find, asked for work at the first laundromat she saw, and started over from nothing. Every evening after her shift, she called Josie. Every weekend, she sent money home. And every night, before she fell asleep, she closed her eyes and told herself the same sentence: tomorrow will be better. She didn't know yet that tomorrow would lead her to a mansion in Gold Coast, standing before a man all of Chicago feared, and her life would never be the same again. Mrs. Greta came to the laundromat on a Wednesday afternoon. She brought 2 expensive suits that needed urgent dry cleaning, the kind of fabric Kira could tell, with one glance, cost as much as her entire month's wages. Kira took the clothes, checked every seam, wrote down the notes carefully, and gave her a pickup date. Mrs. Greta stood there watching her work, saying nothing. The second time she came, she brought another bag of silk scarves. The third time, she didn't bring any laundry at all. She sat down in the waiting chair, waited for Kira's shift to end, then asked, "How long have you been working here?" 3 months, Kira answered. "Would you like to change jobs? The pay is 4 times what you make here, room and board included, living inside the mansion." Kira looked at Mrs. Greta and didn't answer right away. 4 times. That amount of money would be enough to pay down the debt, enough for Josie to enroll in nursing school. But Kira had lived long enough to know there was no such thing as a free meal. "What kind of work?" Kira asked. "Taking care of my employer," Mrs. Greta said. "Mr. Barrett Kensington. He was in a serious accident 2 years ago. His car was sabotaged. He lost almost all of his sight and suffered a mild traumatic brain injury. He needs someone with him every day, someone to help him eat, take his medicine, and do his physical therapy. But no one lasts very long." "Why?" "Because he isn't pleasant," Mrs. Greta said plainly. "He's irritable, he breaks things, and he doesn't want to talk to anyone. The 6 people before you all ran away in the first week. One of them didn't even make it past the 3rd day." Kira was silent for a moment. "Who sabotaged his car?" "A man named Ronan Shaw, a rival in the industry." "But that's Mr. Barrett's story, not mine to tell." Mrs. Greta stopped, looking at Kira as if weighing how much more she should say. "There's one more thing you need to know before you decide. Mr. Barrett's wife, Mrs. Monica, manages everything in the house. After the accident, there was a period when Mr. Barrett wasn't clear-headed. Mrs. Monica used that time to take control of the company, cutting off Mr. Barrett's contact with everyone outside, including the people most loyal to him. Anyone who didn't obey her was fired." "Why did you stay?" Kira asked. "Because I'm old. I'm not a threat to anyone, and she needs someone to clean the house," Mrs. Greta said, her voice calm, though her eyes weren't. "Mrs. Monica stays because of the prenuptial agreement. If she leaves, she loses everything. So she stays, but not out of love." Kira understood. She understood people like Monica, because she'd seen enough cruel people in her life. But she also understood what 4 times the pay meant for her family right now. "I'd like to try," Kira said. Mrs. Greta arranged a video call interview with Monica. Monica was at some resort, with a swimming pool and sunlight behind her. She glanced at Kira through the screen the way someone might glance at an item in a catalog, not quite sure whether she wanted to buy it. "Have you ever cared for a sick person before?" Monica asked. "No," Kira answered, "but I know how to endure, and I don't give up easily." Monica looked at her for a few more seconds. "Fine," she said coldly, "but if I hear anything I don't like, you'll disappear before you even have time to pack." Then she hung up. No goodbye, no appointment, not another word. Mrs. Greta looked at Kira and asked, "Do you still want to go?" "When do I start?" Kira asked back. The next day, Mrs. Greta took Kira to the Kensington mansion in Gold Coast. Kira stepped through the iron gate and looked at the mansion stretching wide before her, vast, but strangely silent, like a house holding its breath. Mrs. Greta led her through a long hallway, showed her the staff room, then stopped before a heavy wooden door at the end of the 2nd floor. "Mr. Barrett's room is in there," Mrs. Greta said. "You'll meet him tomorrow morning. Tonight, get some rest. And remember what I told you, the 6 people before you all ran away." Mrs. Greta turned to leave, then stopped and added without looking back, "I hope you're different." Kira stood alone in the empty hallway, looking at the closed wooden door, and wondered how frightening the man behind it had to be for 6 people in a row to run away. But Kira had once stood in front of debt collectors without stepping back. She wasn't afraid of any man. She was only afraid of not having enough money to send Josie next month. The next morning, Mrs. Greta knocked on Kira's door at 6 o'clock. "Mr. Barrett is awake," she said. "Breakfast and his medicine are already on the tray. Take them up to him." Kira picked up the tray, walked down the second-floor hallway, and stopped in front of the heavy wooden door she had stood staring at the night before. She took a breath, then knocked. No one answered. She knocked again. Still silence. She pushed the door open and stepped inside. The room was dark, the curtains drawn tight, with only one thin blade of light slipping through the gap in the fabric. Barrett Kensington was sitting in an armchair beside the window, his back turned to her. He didn't turn around when he heard the door open. "Mr. Barrett, I brought your breakfast and medicine," Kira said. "Set it down and get out," Barrett said, his voice low and hoarse, like a man who hadn't wanted to use his voice for a long time. Kira set the tray on the table. She meant to turn and leave, but then she saw 2 other trays of food, still untouched from the day before, sitting in the corner of the room, the food gone cold. He hadn't eaten. "Mr. Barrett, you need to eat something. Taking medicine on an empty stomach will." "I said get out." Kira hadn't had time to say anything more before Barrett reached blindly to his right, grabbed the glass of liquor on the table beside his chair, and hurled it straight at the wall. The sound of shattering glass cracked through the sealed room. That was how he drove people away. Kira understood. The 6 people before her had probably stood in this exact spot, heard that exact breaking sound, then walked out and never came back. But Kira didn't move. She stood still, her arms hanging at her sides, looking at Barrett's broad back in the darkness. Then she said, her voice calm, "You can smash everything in this room. I'll still be here, because I need this job, and you need someone who isn't afraid of you." Silence. Barrett didn't turn around. He didn't throw anything else. He didn't say anything else. Only silence, stretching so long that Kira thought he had forgotten she was standing there. Then he said, very quietly, "You'll regret saying that." "Maybe," Kira replied, "but not today." She picked up the broken pieces of glass from the floor, cleared away the 2 old food trays, placed the new tray on the table within his reach, then stepped out and closed the door behind her. In the hallway, Mrs. Greta was waiting, her face tense. "Did he throw something?" she asked. "1 glass," Kira said. "I cleaned it up." Mrs. Greta looked at her as if she were looking at something she had never seen in this house before, then nodded and said nothing more. From that day on, Kira brought the tray up every morning, every noon, and every evening. Barrett didn't throw anything else. He still didn't talk, still kept his back turned, still sat in the dark. But the food on the tray began to disappear. The medicine began to be taken. Kira didn't push, didn't ask, didn't try to become familiar. She simply came, did her work, and left. And that quiet patience, somehow, was making a small crack in the wall Barrett had built around himself for 2 years. 5 days later, Monica came home. Kira was carrying Barrett's medicine up to his room when she heard the click of high heels on the stone floor of the hallway. Monica walked into Barrett's room without knocking, without greeting him, without asking whether he was well. She looked around the room as if she were inspecting a rental apartment, then looked at Barrett, still sitting in the armchair. "You're still sitting here?" Monica said, her voice light as if she were talking about the weather. "Sitting in a dark room all day. You don't have any purpose left, do you? You're just a burden in this house now." Barrett didn't answer. His hand tightened around the arm of the chair, his knuckles turning white, but his face showed nothing. Monica turned to Kira, who was standing in the doorway with the medicine tray. She looked Kira up and down, then spoke to Barrett while her eyes stayed on Kira. "This is the new one? I hope this one lasts longer than the others. I'm tired of hiring people." Then Monica walked out, not waiting for anyone to answer, the sound of her high heels fading down the hallway. Kira stood at the door, gripping the medicine tray so tightly that her fingers went pale. She wanted to say something. She wanted to say that no one deserved to be treated that way, that whoever Barrett was, he was still a human being, that Monica had no right to walk into the room of a man in pain and trample on his dignity like that. But Kira didn't speak. Not yet. She walked in, set the medicine tray on the table, and said softly, "Here is your afternoon medicine, Mr. Barrett." Barrett didn't turn around, but his voice, for the first time since Kira had arrived, wasn't cold anymore. It was only tired. "You heard all of that," he said. "Yes," Kira replied. "I heard." Then she stepped out, closed the door gently, and made herself a promise that she would stay in this house, not only for the salary, but because the man in that dark room didn't deserve to be left alone. Monica went on a business trip 3 days later. The very morning Monica left the mansion, Kira knocked on Barrett's door earlier than usual. "Mr. Barrett, I want to try something," she said. "Can you see anything? Anything at all, even if it's only light?" Barrett was silent for a while. "You said light and dark. I can tell light from dark. Sometimes I can see shadows moving, but not clearly." "Then your eyes still work?" Kira said. "They just need to be trained again." Kira wasn't a doctor. She didn't have any degree in vision or neurology, but she knew how to look for information, and she knew how to be patient. Every day, while Monica was away from the house, Kira spent 1 hour in the morning and 1 hour in the afternoon sitting with Barrett, guiding him through simple eye exercises. She drew the curtains open slowly, letting light into the room little by little, so his eyes could learn to adjust again. She held her hand in front of him at different distances, asking whether he could see it, and how clearly. She was patient, and Barrett, for the first time in 2 years, had someone who didn't give up on him. In the second week, Kira did something she knew would cost her the job at once if Monica found out. She called a taxi, helped Barrett out through the back door, and took him to see an ophthalmologist. Barrett didn't want to go. "If she finds out," he said. "She's in Phoenix," Kira replied. "And you deserve to know the truth about your eyes." The doctor examined him, ran the tests, then said something to Barrett that he hadn't been allowed to hear for 2 years. "Your vision may recover if you continue treatment regularly." Barrett sat still in the examination chair and said nothing, but Kira saw his hand tighten around the armrest and his jaw clench, not because he was in pain, because he had just understood that for the past 2 years, he might have gotten better if someone had brought him here sooner. On the way back, Barrett sat silently in the taxi. Kira sat beside him and said nothing either. She understood what he was thinking. She didn't need to ask. When the taxi stopped in front of the mansion, Barrett opened the door but didn't step out yet. "Kira," he called, using her name for the first time without putting Miss in front of it. "Why are you helping me? You don't know who I am. I have nothing to give you." Kira looked at him. A 33-year-old man who had once made the entire city wary of him was now sitting in a cheap taxi, asking a laundromat girl why she was kind to him. That question wasn't only a question. It was the cry of a man who had grown used to being used, used to being feared, and could no longer remember what it felt like to have someone be kind to him without asking for anything in return. "Because everyone deserves a second chance," Kira said. "Even you." Barrett didn't answer. He stepped out of the car and let Kira guide him back into the house. But his steps were different that day. They weren't heavy, and they didn't drag the way they did every day. He walked, slowly, but straight ahead. From that day on, every morning, Barrett no longer turned his back when Kira came in. He sat facing her, practicing how to see, practicing how to recognize shapes at close range. And sometimes, in the middle of those tense minutes of concentration, he talked. Not much. A few short sentences, but enough for Kira to know that inside that silent man, there was still someone trying to step back into the light. It happened on a Thursday evening, when Kira carried Barrett's medicine tray up to his room as she did every day. She walked down the second-floor hallway, her steps soft on the carpet, when she heard Monica's voice coming from her private room. The door was open just a narrow crack. Kira had no intention of stopping. She was only passing by. But Monica's voice that night was completely different. Not cold, not contemptuous. Sweet, gentle. The kind of voice Kira had never heard Monica use with anyone in this house, especially not with Barrett. "Don't worry," Monica said, her voice low but clear enough through the crack in the door. "Only a few more months. Once everything is done, the two of us will be in Switzerland. He doesn't know anything." Kira stopped dead in the middle of the hallway. The medicine tray in her hands tilted slightly, and she hurried to steady it. Her heart pounded hard. She couldn't hear the rest because Monica lowered her voice, but she didn't need to hear more. "Switzerland. The two of us. He doesn't know anything." Kira kept walking, forcing her steps to stay normal, not allowing a single strange sound. She brought the medicine into Barrett's room, set it on the table, said a few short words the way she did every evening, then left. That night, Kira lay in bed, eyes wide open as she stared at the ceiling, rearranging in her mind everything she had seen since the day she stepped into this mansion. Monica was away constantly. Monica never cared about Barrett's treatment. Monica controlled every connection in and out of this house. And now, Monica was talking to someone about running away with Barrett's assets. Kira didn't know who was on the other end of the line. She didn't know exactly what the plan was, but she knew one thing for certain. Monica wasn't a good person, and Barrett was being imprisoned by her inside his own home. From that day on, Kira began to watch. She paid attention to which car picked Monica up each time she left. She remembered what time Monica made phone calls, how many times a week, and whether she closed her bedroom door each time she called. She didn't tell anyone, not even Mrs. Greta. Not yet. 2 weeks later, Monica returned from a business trip. This time, she came back earlier than expected. No one had time to prepare. Kira was in Barrett's room, guiding him through shape recognition exercises as she did every day. Barrett sat facing her, his hand raised, trying to focus on Kira's fingers as she moved them back and forth in front of him. 3 fingers, Barrett said. That's right, Kira said, unable to hide her smile. Yesterday you only saw 2. At that exact moment, the door flew open. Monica stood on the threshold, her eyes fixed on the sight of Kira sitting across from Barrett, the two of them close, Barrett concentrating on Kira's hand. Monica didn't ask. She didn't need to ask. She understood. "What the hell are you doing?" Monica said, her voice no longer indifferent the way it had been before. Her voice shook with anger. "I'm helping Mr. Barrett practice recovering his vision, ma'am," Kira answered, standing up. "Who gave you permission?" Monica stepped into the room, then turned toward Barrett. "You think you're going to get better? You think this little girl can cure you? No one accepts a piece of trash like you. I'm the only one willing to stay beside you. No one else wants you. No one." Barrett sat still. His hand tightened around the arm of the chair, as it always did. His jaw clenched, as it always did. But he didn't answer. Not because he was weak, because he was being patient. And Kira, this time, couldn't hold herself back. Monica turned and walked out into the hallway. Kira followed her. "Mrs. Monica," Kira called. Monica stopped, turning her head, her eyes narrowing as if she couldn't believe a servant dared to call after her. "I won't stand by and watch you destroy a man just because you need him weak enough for you to control," Kira said, one word at a time, looking straight into Monica's eyes. "He's improving. He can recover. You should be the happiest person, but instead, you're the most afraid. Why?" Monica stepped closer to Kira. Very close. Close enough for Kira to smell the expensive perfume and feel the heat of her angry breath. Then Monica raised her hand and slapped Kira. Kira didn't dodge. She didn't slap her back. She stood still, her cheek burning, looked straight at Monica, and said, "You just showed me exactly what I thought." Monica stood there, her hand still raised, trembling slightly. Not because she regretted it, because for the first time in this house, someone had looked her straight in the face and refused to lower her eyes. Monica dropped her hand, turned, and walked away, the sound of her high heels striking the stone floor faster than usual. Kira stood alone in the hallway, her cheek still stinging, her hand clenched tight. She knew that from this moment on, Monica wouldn't leave her alone. But Kira also knew something else. She had seen Monica's hand shake, and a person whose hand shook was a person who was afraid. The only question was what Monica was afraid of, and Kira would find out. Monica didn't wait long to retaliate. The very next afternoon, she called Kira down to the basement. "The storage room down there is too messy," Monica said, her voice ordinary, as if she were asking someone to wipe a table. "Straighten it up. All of it. Today." Kira looked at Monica and knew this wasn't a normal request, but she had no reason to refuse. She nodded and went downstairs. The basement of the Kensington mansion sat deep below ground, at the end of a narrow staircase, with no windows. The storage room was the last room in the farthest corner, packed with cardboard boxes, old belongings, and things no one had probably touched in years. Kira started cleaning. She pulled out one box after another, arranged them again, and wiped the floor. It was hard work in a cramped space, with air that felt stifling and stale. She had been working for about 2 hours when she heard footsteps on the stairs. Then came the sound of the storage room door slamming shut. Then the sound of a lock turning. Kira ran to the door and pushed. It didn't move. She pounded on the door and called out loudly. No one answered. On the other side, the footsteps climbed back up the stairs, growing farther away, then disappearing completely. Kira stood in the dark, her hand still pressed against the cold iron door. She understood. Monica didn't only want to punish her. Monica wanted her to know who truly held power in this house. Kira sat down on the concrete floor and leaned her back against the wall. No light, no water, no phone. She had left her phone on the nightstand because she thought she was only going down to clean and then coming back up. During the first hour, she was still calm. She sat and waited, thinking Mrs. Greta would realize she was missing and come look for her. But the second hour passed, then the third, and no one came. Kira began to feel thirsty. The air in the sealed storage room grew heavier and more suffocating. She tried to stay calm, breathing slowly, saving her strength. But her body was already tired after 2 hours of cleaning, and without water, her strength began to drain away. She didn't know what time it was. She didn't know how long she had been there. She only knew the darkness around her had thickened, and the silence was so heavy that she could hear her own heart beating. Upstairs on the second floor, Barrett sat in his armchair, waiting. At 7 o'clock in the evening, Kira usually brought his medicine up. 7:30 came, and she still hadn't appeared. 8 o'clock came, and still nothing. Barrett called out. No one answered. He stood up, opened his bedroom door, and walked down the hallway by memory, one hand braced against the wall. He found Mrs. Greta's room. "Where is Kira?" he asked. Mrs. Greta looked up, worry crossing her face. "Mrs. Monica sent her down to clean the basement storage room this afternoon. I thought she had already come back up." "She hasn't," Barrett said. "She hasn't come up, Mrs." Greta started to rise and go look for her, but Barrett had already turned and walked away first. He headed toward the basement stairs. "Mrs." Greta hurried after him. "Mr. Barrett, let me go." "You can't." "I can walk," Barrett said without turning back. The stairs down to the basement were narrow and steep. Barrett gripped the handrail and took one step at a time. His eyes could only see darkness, but his feet remembered every stair. He had lived in this house for 15 years. He didn't need sight to know the way. When he reached the basement, Barrett moved down the hallway, his left hand gliding along the wall, and called out, "Kira." No answer came. He kept walking and called again, "Kira." Silence. Then he reached the end of the hallway, and his hand touched the iron door of the storage room, locked. He struck the door with his fist. "Kira, are you in there?" After a moment, a very long moment, he heard it. A weak voice, almost too faint to shape the words, drifting through the thick iron door. "Mr. Barrett." Barrett turned his head and shouted up toward the staircase. "Mrs. Greta, bring the key down here. Right now, Mrs." Greta ran to find the spare key. Barrett stood before the door, his hand pressed against the cold metal, and spoke through the crack. "I'm here. Can you hear me? I'm right here." Mrs. Greta came back with the key. The door opened. Kira was sitting against the wall inside, her eyes closed, her body limp, caught somewhere between consciousness and collapse. Mrs. Greta helped her up and guided her toward the stairs. Barrett walked behind them, one hand against the wall, moving slowly but never stopping. They brought Kira back to her room and laid her on the bed. "Mrs." Greta brought water and a wet towel, gently wiping Kira's face. Kira drank the water and slowly came back to herself, but she still couldn't speak. "Mrs." Greta looked at Barrett and said softly, "You should go back to your room and rest. I'll watch over her." Barrett didn't answer. He pulled a chair beside Kira's bed, sat down, and didn't go anywhere. "Mrs." Greta looked at him for a while, then understood. Then she left, closing the door softly behind her. Barrett Kensington, the man all of Chicago had once feared, sat beside the servant girl's bed all night. He couldn't see her, but he was there. Kira woke up close to noon the next day. She opened her eyes and found herself lying in bed in her own room, a wet towel resting on her forehead, a glass of water on the nightstand, and the chair beside her bed had been pulled close, as if someone had sat there for a very long time before finally leaving. Mrs. Greta came into the room, bringing her porridge and water. "Mr. Barrett sat here until 4 o'clock in the morning, Mrs." Greta said gently. "I had to tell him 3 times before he agreed to go back to his room." Kira didn't answer. She looked at the chair and felt something tighten in her chest. It wasn't pain, but it was something she hadn't felt in a very long time. That afternoon, Kira forced herself to get up. She didn't want Barrett to have to wait for his medicine. She picked up the tray, walked down the hallway, and knocked on his door. Barrett was sitting in the armchair, but today his face was turned toward the door, as if he had been waiting for her. "You didn't need to get up so soon," Barrett said. "I'm fine," Kira replied. "You need to take your medicine." She walked to the table, set the tray down, then reached for the medicine bottle on the shelf. The bottle was smooth and slipped from her hand. Kira hadn't had time to react before Barrett reached out and caught the medicine bottle in midair, in the right direction, in the right place, with absolute precision. Then both of them stood still. The medicine bottle lay in Barrett's hand. His hand was extended exactly where the bottle had fallen, a reflex no one who could see nothing could possibly have. The silence stretched on. Kira looked at Barrett. Barrett still held the bottle and didn't move. He knew she understood, and she knew that he knew. "You can see," Kira said, and it wasn't a question. Barrett lowered his hand and slowly placed the medicine bottle on the table. "Not completely clearly," he said, "but more than I've let everyone see." "Since when?" "For a few weeks now. A little clearer every day, because of the training sessions with you." "Why did you hide it?" Barrett turned his face toward the window, though the curtains were still drawn tight. "Because if Monica knows I'm seeing again, she'll run. She'll take everything she's been draining from my company and disappear before I can do anything. I'm playing a long game, Kira, and I need her to believe I'm still blind." Kira stood still, looking at him. This man wasn't only enduring, he was calculating. Through 2 years of sitting in darkness, being humiliated by his wife, being abandoned by the whole world, he hadn't collapsed. He had been waiting. "You're the only person who knows," Barrett said, "and I need you to keep this secret." "I'll keep it," Kira said, "but you need more people. You can't do this alone." Barrett was silent for a while. Then he said, "Do you have your phone?" "Yes. Call this number." He recited a string of numbers, slowly and clearly. "When someone answers, you only need to say 2 words. Quiet King." Kira didn't ask why. She took out her phone, dialed the number, and waited. 3 rings. 4 rings. Then someone picked up. Silence on the other end. With no one speaking first, Kira said, "Quiet King." The silence lasted a few more seconds. Then a man's voice came through, deep, hoarse, and trembling slightly. "I've waited for this call for 2 years." Then he hung up. Kira looked at Barrett. Barrett nodded. "Pike will make contact again. He knows what to do." Kira didn't ask who Pike was. She didn't need to ask. She only needed to know that Barrett was no longer alone. But that night, Barrett discovered something else. His room was at the end of the second-floor hallway, quiet, and at night, when the whole mansion slept, every sound was clearer than it was during the day. Barrett was lying in bed, still awake, when he heard soft footsteps outside the hallway. Curtis, the head bodyguard, the man who had followed Barrett for 8 years, was walking toward the stairs, trying to step as quietly as possible. Barrett sat up and listened. Curtis's voice drifted up from downstairs, whispered but clear enough in the deep night. "Rest assured, Mr. Shaw, Barrett can't see anything. Mrs. Monica has signed the papers. We only need a few more months and it'll be done." Barrett lay back down, his eyes wide open in the darkness. Curtis, 8 years. Curtis's wife had been hospitalized after a car accident 3 years earlier, and Barrett had paid the hospital bill. Curtis's son had gone to college, and Barrett had funded the tuition. For 8 years, he had treated Curtis like family, and Curtis had sold him to Ronan Shaw. Barrett didn't get angry. He lay still, breathing evenly, and thought. The next morning, Barrett told Kira to call Curtis into the room. Curtis walked in and stood at attention as usual. "Close the door," Barrett said. Curtis closed the door. Barrett sat in the armchair, not wearing his black glasses. His eyes aimed straight at Curtis, though Curtis didn't know whether Barrett could see or not. "Curtis, how long have you been with me?" Barrett asked, his voice normal. 8 years, sir." 8 years, Barrett repeated. "Do you remember when your wife was in the hospital? Who paid the hospital bill?" Curtis swallowed. "You did, sir." "Where does your son go to college?" "Northwestern, sir." "Who pays the tuition?" Silence. "You do, sir." Barrett nodded slowly. "And yet last night, you called Ronan Shaw at 2 o'clock in the morning and told him I couldn't see anything, and that Monica had already signed the papers." Curtis stood frozen. His face went pale. His legs wanted to step back, but he didn't dare move. Barrett didn't raise his voice. He didn't stand. He didn't threaten him with any action at all. He only spoke, very softly, almost in a whisper. From now on, you'll still report to Ronan, but you'll report what I want Ronan to hear. Do it well, and your son will still go to school. Do it poorly. Barrett stopped. He didn't finish the sentence. He rose, walked to Curtis's side, gave his shoulder one light pat, then turned and sat back down in the chair. Curtis stood there, his legs shaking, sweat running down his spine, and understood that Barrett Kensington had just turned him from Ronan Shaw's insider into a pawn in Barrett's hand. He didn't need to strike him. He didn't need to shout. He only needed to remind him of the debt he owed, then let the silence finish the rest. Curtis walked out of the room, closed the door, and for the first time in 8 years, he was truly afraid of the man he had once thought was finished. 3 days after the basement incident, Monica made her move. It began with a photograph. Kira had taken a picture of Barrett's medication schedule on her phone so she could send it to the pharmacist and ask about the dosage, because she had noticed Barrett often became dizzy after taking his afternoon medicine. That was all. One photograph of a medication schedule. But Monica didn't need the truth. Monica needed a reason. That evening, Kira was cleaning the dining room when Monica walked in, followed by Curtis. Monica was holding Kira's phone in her hand, the screen already open to the photograph of the medication schedule. "Explain this," Monica said, lifting the phone. "Who were you sending my husband's medical records to? Who planted you here?" "I took the picture to ask the pharmacist about the dosage," Kira said. "Mr. Barrett gets dizzy after taking it, and I wanted to check." "Stop," Monica cut in. "I don't believe a single word. You're a spy. A rival planted you here to gather information about my husband, about the company, about this family's assets. I should call the police, but I'm being kind. You have 10 minutes to pack your things and get out." "Mrs. Monica, you know that isn't true." 5 minutes, Monica said, lowering her voice. "Do you want me to make it 5 minutes, Mrs.?" Greta stood in the kitchen doorway, watching the scene, then stepped forward. "Mrs. Monica, Kira isn't." Monica turned to Mrs. Greta, her eyes cold. "Anyone who defends that girl will be out on the street too. Would you like to try me, Mrs. Greta?" Mrs. Greta stopped. She looked at Kira, her eyes red, but she said nothing more. She understood. If she was thrown out too, there would be no one left beside Barrett. Kira understood that look. She shook her head slightly at Mrs. Greta, telling her not to say another word. Then she turned back to Monica. "I'll go." Kira went upstairs to her room and shoved a few pieces of clothing into the small suitcase she had brought here 3 months earlier. Monica didn't return her phone. Curtis escorted Kira to the gate, without looking her in the eyes. The iron gate closed behind Kira. It was 10 o'clock at night. Kira stood on the sidewalk in front of the Kensington mansion, holding her suitcase, with no phone, no cash, because her wallet was still inside the handbag in her room, and Monica hadn't allowed her to take it. She had only the clothes on her body, the suitcase, and the shoes worn thin at the heels. Kira began to walk. She didn't know where to go. She had given up her old rented room before moving into the mansion. She couldn't remember the address, because all the information was in the phone Monica had kept. She had walked 2 blocks when she found a public payphone. She dug through her pocket and found a few loose coins, enough for one call. She called Josie. Josie picked up after the first ring, as if her little sister had been awake too. "Sis," Josie said, her voice worried. "They came back for the money." 1 sentence. That was all it took. Kira stood inside the phone booth, holding the receiver, and closed her eyes. No job, no money, no place to stay. And back in Detroit, her family was being threatened again. Rock bottom. This was rock bottom. Kira had thought she knew what rock bottom was when her father died. But tonight, she learned that the real bottom was losing everything all at once, with no one left to call. "Listen to me," Kira said, her voice calm even though something inside her was breaking. "I'll handle it. Watch, Mom. Don't open the door for anyone. I'll call back as soon as I can." She hung up. She stood inside the phone booth for 1 more minute, breathing. Then she stepped out. Kira Dawson didn't cry. She didn't sit down on the sidewalk and hold her head in her hands. She walked. She walked down the street until she saw the lights of a small restaurant still open. She pushed the door open, found the manager, and said, "I need a job. Anything. Washing dishes, mopping floors, clearing tables. I can start right now. I just need to work through the night." The manager looked at her, looked at the suitcase, looked into her eyes that weren't crying but were red, then nodded. Dishes. Back of the kitchen. Shift ends at 6 o'clock in the morning. Kira dragged her suitcase into the corner of the kitchen, rolled up her sleeves, and began washing dishes. Hot water poured over her hands, and the soap stung the old blisters from the laundromat, but she didn't stop. She washed every plate, every pot, every glass, and inside her head there was only one thought. Tomorrow. She would figure it out tomorrow. Mrs. Greta found Kira the next morning at 6 o'clock, just as Kira had finished her dishwashing shift. She was sitting on the back steps of the restaurant, her hands red from hot water, dark circles under her eyes from a sleepless night, her small suitcase resting beside her feet. Mrs. Greta stood in front of her, breathing hard, as if she had gone to many places looking for her. Mr. Barrett sent me to find you at 4 o'clock in the morning, Mrs. Greta said. I went through 3 restaurants, 2 cafes, and a bus station before I got here. How did he know I was here? Kira asked. He didn't know. He told me to search every place I could, because he knew you weren't the kind of person who would sit on the street waiting for someone to save you. He said you would find work before the night was over. Kira looked at Mrs. Greta and said nothing. Barrett knew her. He understood her, and that left her not knowing what she was supposed to feel. He wants to see you, Mrs. Greta said. Not at the mansion. He's waiting at a cafe nearby. Kira picked up her suitcase and followed Mrs. Greta. The cafe sat on a quiet street, the kind of small, discreet place with few customers. Kira noticed at once that something was unusual when she approached. 2 men in black suits stood outside the door, arms folded, their eyes sweeping the street again and again. Bodyguards. Inside, Barrett sat at a table in the far corner, wearing black glasses, his back resting against the chair. On the table, there was only 1 cup of untouched coffee. He didn't look like the man who had sat in a dark room and thrown a glass of liquor against the wall. He sat straight, his shoulders open, his hands resting calmly on the table. This wasn't the Barrett Kira had cared for inside the mansion. This was Barrett Kensington, the man all of Chicago had once feared. Kira sat down across from him. Barrett didn't greet her, didn't ask whether she was all right, didn't begin with any polite words. He asked directly, "Your family is being threatened over a debt?" Kira froze. She hadn't told Barrett about that. Never. "How do you know?" "I know," Barrett said. "And I've had someone handle it. That group won't come back anymore. That debt no longer exists." Kira sat still. She wanted to ask how, who had handled it, and what had been done. But she looked at the 2 bodyguards outside the door, looked at the way Barrett was sitting, listened to the tone in his voice that didn't welcome questions, and understood that there were some questions that didn't need to be asked. "Thank you," Kira said. "Don't thank me," Barrett replied. "Listen to me." He leaned forward and lowered his voice. "Monica is having an affair with Wesley Grant, the chief financial officer of my company. Wesley has been draining money from the company and moving it into overseas accounts. Over the past 6 months, they've transferred a very large amount, and Monica told me she's pregnant with my child, but I have reason to believe that's a lie." Barrett spoke in short, clear sentences, without wasting a single word, like a man who had thought through everything for a very long time and was now only stating the conclusion. "I need proof," Barrett continued. "Proof strong enough to take to court. I've asked Attorney Hoffman to contact the FBI because this is large-scale embezzlement involving international money transfers. The FBI is reviewing it. Pike is tracking every one of Wesley's transactions. Curtis is reporting false information to Ronan Shaw under my direction, so Ronan will think everything is still going according to his plan." Barrett paused, looking at Kira through his black glasses. "But I need one more person. Someone Monica won't expect. Someone who can face her without fear." Kira understood who he meant. "I'm not forcing you to help," Barrett said. "You don't owe me anything. Monica threw you out. I erased your family's debt, and those 2 things aren't connected. But if you agree to help me, I'll protect your family to the end." Kira looked at Barrett. She thought of Monica, the woman who had called her own husband a piece of trash, who had locked Kira in the basement, who had thrown her into the street in the middle of the night, who had taken her phone and wallet. She thought of Barrett sitting beside her bed all night after the basement incident, even though his eyes couldn't see anything. She thought of Mrs. Greta searching for her since 4 o'clock in the morning. "I'm not agreeing because you erased my debt," Kira said. "I'm agreeing because she deserves to be exposed." Barrett nodded. He didn't smile, didn't thank her, didn't say anything more about it. He moved immediately to the next part, like a man used to giving orders and not wasting time on emotion. Pike will contact you within the next 2 days. He'll give you a new phone and a temporary place to stay. You're not going back to the mansion yet. Not now. Curtis is letting Ronan hear what I want Ronan to hear. Wesley thinks everything is safe. Monica thinks you've disappeared. Let all of them keep thinking that. Barrett took his first sip of coffee. When I'm ready, I'll call you. Kira stood, holding her suitcase. Before she walked away, she stopped and looked at Barrett. Mr. Barrett, how are your eyes today? Barrett didn't answer right away. He looked toward her through the black glasses and said, I can see that you're standing. 1 sentence. But it was enough for Kira to know those eyes were coming back to life, and the game had begun. Monica called Ronan Shaw the very night she threw Kira out. Not because she needed to report to him, because she was arrogant. Monica liked to show off her victories, and Ronan was the only person outside who knew about her plan. I got rid of that girl, Monica said over the phone, her voice full of triumph. She was the only person Barrett has talked to the most in the past 2 years. You should know that, in case she causes trouble. Monica said it because she wanted to brag. But Ronan Shaw wasn't the kind of man who listened and then forgot. He was the kind of man who listened and then calculated. If that girl mattered to Barrett, then that girl was leverage. 2 days after the meeting with Barrett at the cafe, Kira was walking along Clark Street, on her way to the temporary place Pike had arranged for her, when a black car stopped close to the curb. 2 men got out, quick and silent, one blocking Kira from the front, the other standing behind her. Get in, the man in front said. Mr. Shaw wants to talk. Kira didn't have time to react. They didn't touch her, but the way they stood, the way they blocked her path, left her no choice. Kira got into the car. They took her to a warehouse on the southern outskirts of Chicago. Ronan Shaw sat on a folding chair in the middle of the room, one leg crossed over the other, a phone in his hand as he scrolled lightly, as if he were waiting for someone who didn't matter very much. When Kira walked in, he looked up at her, then put the phone away. Sit, Ronan said, pointing to the chair across from him. Kira sat, not because she was being polite, because she wanted to see his face clearly. Do you know who Barrett Kensington is? Ronan asked, his voice calm, as if they were making casual conversation. I know, Kira replied. Then you know how dangerous it is to stand beside him. I'm not standing beside him. I was thrown out of his house. But you're still important to him, Ronan said. Monica said so. And I believe Monica, because on that part, she has no reason to lie. Ronan leaned forward. I'll be direct. Leave Chicago. I'll give you money. Enough for your family to live comfortably for a few years. In exchange, you disappear from Barrett Kensington's life. No calls, no contact, no coming back. Kira looked at Ronan. He spoke as if he were offering a reasonable deal, his voice courteous, his eyes carrying a slight smile. But Kira had lived long enough among dangerous people to know what that polite smile was hiding underneath. And if I don't leave? Kira asked. Then I can't guarantee your sister's safety, Ronan said, still smiling. Kira clenched her hands on her lap. Josie. He knew about Josie. If you threaten my family, Kira said, her voice steady even though her heart was beating very fast, then you're no better than the men who took my father's life. The smile on Ronan's face vanished. He looked at Kira for a long time, as if reassessing her. Then he stood, buttoned his suit jacket, and said to the 2 guards, Keep her here. I'll decide later. Ronan walked out. The car engine started, then faded into the distance. Kira remained seated, with the 2 guards standing at the door. She looked around. No rope, no handcuffs. They didn't consider her a threat. A thin girl with no weapon, alone in an empty stretch outside the city. Where could she possibly run? But they didn't know Kira Dawson. She waited 10 minutes. Then she clutched her stomach, bent over, and gave a small groan. My stomach hurts, she said weakly. I need to use the toilet. The 2 men looked at each other. One of them nodded and led her behind the warehouse, where there was an outdoor toilet. When the man opened the toilet door, his back turned toward Kira for half a second. Kira shoved him hard from behind. He lost his balance, and Kira ran. She ran with everything she had, never looking back, out into the alley behind the warehouse, turning left, then right, then straight toward the main road. Behind her came shouting and the sound of footsteps chasing after her. She made it 2 blocks before the other man caught up and blocked her way. Kira stopped, gasping for breath. At that exact moment, another black car pulled up close to the curb. The door opened. Pike was sitting inside, and he said exactly 2 words. "Get in." Kira jumped into the car. Pike hit the gas. The man chasing her stood in the middle of the road, watching the car disappear at the end of the street. Inside the car, Pike handed Kira a phone. "Mr. Barrett wants to talk." Kira took the phone, her hand still trembling. Barrett answered before she could speak. "Are you hurt?" Barrett asked, and Kira heard something in his voice that she had never heard before. "Real worry." "I'm fine," Kira said. "I got out on my own." "I know," Barrett said. "Pike has been watching you since yesterday, but you ran out before Pike had time to go in." Silence held for 1 second. Then Barrett spoke again, his voice cold once more, but not cold toward Kira. "Let me deal with Ronan." Barrett called Ronan. The call lasted less than 30 seconds. "Ronan, I know where she is. I know where you are. And you know me. When I speak, I don't say it twice." Then he hung up. For the next 48 hours, Barrett didn't call Ronan again. He didn't need to. He ordered Pike to contact each of Ronan's business partners, one by one, reminding them that Barrett Kensington was still alive, still seeing everything, and that anyone who continued working with Ronan should reconsider his future. There were no specific threats, no gunshots, only polite phone calls, a calm voice, and the name Barrett Kensington. Within 48 hours, Ronan Shaw lost his 3 biggest partners. 3 underground business operations in southern Chicago shut down because no one dared to keep supplying them. Ronan called Barrett, and this time, his voice was no longer polite. Barrett didn't answer. He let Ronan call 3 times, 4 times, then left him with silence. Because Barrett Kensington didn't need to listen to what a loser had to say. Pike brought Kira back to the Kensington mansion that afternoon. Barrett was waiting in the first-floor hallway, not sitting in his armchair, not hidden inside the dark room. He was standing, one hand resting lightly against the wall, his face turned toward the door, as if he had been standing there for a long time. When Kira walked in, Barrett didn't ask whether she was all right. He didn't say a word. He stepped toward her, slowly, 1 step at a time, then lifted his hand. His hand touched Kira's face, gently, from her forehead down to her cheek, from her cheek down to her chin. His fingers stopped at her left cheekbone, where there was a small scratch from when she had run past the fence behind Ronan Shaw's warehouse. He couldn't see the scratch clearly, but he could feel it. Kira stood still. She didn't breathe. She let his hand remain on her face, and for the first time since the night she had been thrown out of the mansion, since the night she had sat washing dishes in that cheap restaurant, since the moment she had been locked inside Ronan Shaw's warehouse, Kira cried. Not out loud. Tears slipped across Barrett's fingers. He felt them. "I'm sorry," Barrett said, his voice hoarse, "because knowing me dragged you into this." Kira took his hand on her face, held it tightly, and said, "I wasn't dragged in. I chose to be here." Barrett didn't answer. His hand trembled lightly in hers. Kira added, her voice steady again, "Don't apologize. End this." Barrett lowered his hand, nodded, and from that moment, everything between them changed. Not love spoken aloud, not promises, only 2 people who had seen each other in the darkest place, and neither one had turned away. 1 week before the charity gala, Barrett was planning. Everything collapsed. Barrett woke up at 5 o'clock in the morning. He opened his eyes. Blackness. He blinked. Still blackness. He turned his head toward the window, where every morning the early sunlight slipped through the narrow gap in the curtains, making a thin line of brightness he had begun to see clearly in recent weeks. Nothing. Not one ray of light. Not one blurred shadow. Complete darkness, just like 2 years before. Barrett sat up. His hand reached across the nightstand, searching for the glass of water, and knocked it onto the floor. He stood, staggered, and struck his shoulder against the wall. He knew what this was. The doctor had warned him that stress could cause his vision to drop suddenly, but knowing was one thing. Living through it was another. Barrett wasn't afraid of the dark. He had lived in darkness for 2 years. He was afraid of something else. He was afraid the gala wouldn't happen. He was afraid Ronan would win. He was afraid Monica would take everything and disappear. And he was afraid Kira would be in danger, and he wouldn't be able to protect her. For the first time in 2 years, Barrett Kensington panicked. Kira found him at 6 o'clock in the morning. Mrs. Greta had called her in, saying Barrett wouldn't open the door and wouldn't answer. Kira knocked, and there was no response. She pushed the door open. Barrett was sitting on the floor, his back against the foot of the bed, both hands clutching his head. The room was dark because the curtains were drawn tight, but Kira knew that wasn't why Barrett was sitting on the floor. "Mr. Barrett," she called. Barrett didn't look up. "I can't see anything," he said. "I woke up this morning. I can't see anything. Nothing at all." His voice wasn't shaking, but the hands wrapped around his head were. Kira didn't say, "It'll be all right." She didn't say, "Don't worry." She didn't say any meaningless words of comfort. She sat down on the floor beside him, leaned her back against the foot of the bed, and took his hand. She sat there, saying nothing, just holding his hand. 1 minute passed, 2 minutes. Barrett lowered his hands from his head and let his hand rest in Kira's. "I can't go blind again," he said, his voice low. "Not now. The plan will fall apart. Ronan will win. Monica will take everything." He stopped. "And I can't protect you if I can't see anything." Kira held his hand tighter. "You don't need sight to fight," she said. "You lived 2 years in darkness and still kept your empire. You turned Curtis into a pawn before your eyes could see clearly. You made Ronan lose 3 partners with phone calls. You didn't need your eyes to do any of that. You needed your mind, and your mind is still intact." Barrett was silent. Then he asked, his voice so small that Kira had to lean closer to hear it clearly. "What if I'm blind forever?" Kira looked at him. The man all of Chicago feared was sitting on his bedroom floor, asking her a question he had never dared to ask anyone. That question wasn't really about his eyes. That question was, "If I'm like this forever, will you stay?" "Then I'll be your eyes," Kira said. Barrett lowered his head. His forehead touched Kira's shoulder. He didn't cry, but his whole body trembled, softly, like the last wall inside him had finally fallen. Kira sat still, letting him lean on her shoulder, and said nothing more. They sat on the floor of the dark room until early sunlight slipped through the gap in the curtains, even though Barrett couldn't see that sunlight. 5 days later, Barrett's vision began to return, slowly. Blurred shadows first, then shapes, then lines. By the day of the gala, he could see about 7 or 8 tenths. Not completely, but enough. Enough for him to see Ronan Shaw's face when the game ended. The Kensington Holdings Charity Gala took place on the top floor of a 5-star hotel in downtown Chicago. Barrett hosted it, inviting every partner, shareholder, and influential figure in the city's business world. Monica was forced to appear as the boss's wife, smiling, shaking hands, playing the perfect woman she had been pretending to be for the past 2 years. Kira appeared as a server, a white shirt, a tray of drinks in her hand, moving among the guests while no one paid attention to her. That was the plan. Kira didn't need anyone to notice her. She only needed Monica to notice her, and Monica did. She was standing there talking to a group of shareholders when she turned her head and saw Kira walking past with a tray of wine. Monica's eyes widened. Then they darkened. Monica set her glass down on the nearest table, walked quickly toward Kira, grabbed her by the arm, and pulled her into a private room beside the main hall. She shut the door. "What are you doing here?" Monica said, her voice hissing through her teeth. "I threw you out. Who let you in?" "I was hired to serve at the party," Kira said calmly. "The event company hired me. It has nothing to do with you. Liar. Barrett planted you here. He planted you here to watch me." Kira looked at Monica and decided to play the card she had been holding for a very long time. "Do you think I need Barrett to plant me here to know about you?" Kira said. "I heard you talking on the phone with Wesley Grant weeks ago. Switzerland, right? The 2 of us will be in Switzerland?" Monica froze. Her face went white. Then she regained her composure. Or at least tried to. She tilted her head, looked at Kira, and changed tactics. "All right," Monica said, her voice slowing, calmer now, and more dangerous. "You know about Wesley. So what? Do you think Barrett loves you? Do you think he keeps you beside him because he needs you?" Monica stepped closer and lowered her voice. "He chose you because you're easy to control. A poor little girl from Detroit, buried in debt, ready to do anything for money. You think that's love? That's strategy. You're just his tool. Exactly like me." Kira stood still. Those words struck the deepest place inside her. The place she had always feared but never spoken aloud. Was Barrett sincere? Or was she only a convenient pawn? A poor girl with nothing to lose, willing to do whatever he needed. Kira swayed. She felt as if the floor had tilted beneath her. Monica was winning. She saw Kira waver and smiled, the smile of someone who knew she had just found the right weakness. But in that silent moment, Kira remembered. She remembered Barrett's hand touching her face in the hallway, his fingers stopping at the scratch on her cheek, trembling slightly. She remembered how he had quietly used his power to erase her family's crushing debt just to keep them safe, asking for nothing in return. Those things couldn't be faked. Kira lifted her head. She looked straight at Monica. "Maybe you're right," Kira said, her voice calm again. "Maybe I'm only a tool. But I'm looking you straight in the face and telling the truth. You're his wife, and you sold him to Ronan Shaw. You took his money to support your lover. You faked a pregnancy to keep your place beside him. So between you and me, who is really the tool?" Monica lost control. She couldn't hold it in anymore. All the arrogance, all the anger she had swallowed for months, came pouring out. "What do you know?" Monica shouted, her voice breaking. "What do you know about my life? I stayed beside that man for 2 years, caring for a blind man, putting up with his rage, playing the devoted wife in front of the whole world. I deserve to be compensated. Wesley loves me. He gives me what Barrett never did, attention. I have a share in that company's money too. I'm taking back what belongs to me. And the baby, yes, it isn't Barrett's. So what? He's blind. He doesn't know. He'll never know." Kira stood still and let Monica spill everything. Every sentence. Every confession. The affair with Wesley. The money drained from the company. The false pregnancy. The information sold to Ronan. All of it. Monica said everything because she thought no one could hear except Kira. But Monica didn't know that in the room next door, behind one thin wall, Attorney Hoffman and 2 FBI agents were sitting perfectly still, headphones pressed to their ears, the microphone recording everything. Every word, every confession, every piece of evidence. Kira looked at Monica, at the woman standing there breathless after pouring it all out, her eyes red, her hands shaking, and for the first time, Kira didn't feel angry. She felt pity. Pity for a woman who had had everything but couldn't keep anything, because she had never understood that the most valuable things weren't kept in bank accounts. But pity didn't mean forgiveness. Kira turned, walked out of the room, and closed the door gently behind her. The rest of tonight was no longer her job. The rest belonged to Barrett. While Kira was confronting Monica in the private room, out in the main hall, Barrett Kensington stood in the middle of the gala he had organized, wearing black glasses, holding a glass of wine, speaking with shareholders as if this were only an ordinary evening. No one knew he could see. No one knew tonight was the final night of a game that had lasted 2 years. Then Ronan Shaw walked in. No invitation. No need for one. Ronan stepped through the doors of the main hall as if he owned the place, dressed in a black suit, head held high, smiling at a few familiar guests before walking straight toward Barrett. "You look healthier than I expected," Ronan said, standing across from Barrett, his voice light, though his eyes weren't. "Or are you still acting?" Barrett turned toward Ronan. The black glasses were still on his face. The glass of wine was still in his hand. He smiled. The kind of smile that people who had once worked for him knew was never a good sign. "Ronan," Barrett said, "I'm glad you came. I have a gift for you tonight." Ronan raised an eyebrow, but before he could answer, Pike stepped up beside Barrett and handed him a small USB drive. Barrett took it, turned it lightly between 2 fingers, then looked toward Attorney Hoffman, who was standing nearby. "Hoffman," Barrett said, loudly enough for Ronan to hear. "This contains every transaction between Mr. Shaw and my wife, the entire plan to take over my company, and every communication between Mr. Shaw and Curtis, the bodyguard Mr. Shaw bought. Send a copy to the FBI." Barrett handed the USB drive to Hoffman. Hoffman accepted it, nodded, and walked away. Ronan stood still. The smile vanished from his face. "What are you doing?" Ronan asked, his voice still trying to stay calm, though his jaw had already tightened. "I'm ending this," Barrett said. Ronan looked around the main hall. Guests were beginning to turn their heads. Whispers spread through the room. Ronan knew he was losing control, and when Ronan Shaw lost control, he knew no method except attack. "Who the hell do you think you are?" Ronan said, his voice rising, no longer able to hold steady. "You're just a blind man. All of Chicago knows you're finished. You sat in a dark room for 2 years. Let your wife take the company. Let your own men sell you out. And now you're standing here waving a USB drive like it means something?" The main hall fell silent. Hundreds of eyes turned toward Barrett and Ronan. No one spoke. No one moved. Barrett set his glass of wine down on the nearest table. Slowly. Then he lifted his hand. He took hold of the frame of his black glasses and removed them. Slowly. For the first time in 2 years, Barrett Kensington's face was no longer hidden behind black glasses. His eyes were open, looking straight ahead, seeing clearly, looking directly into Ronan Shaw's face. "I can see very clearly, Ronan," Barrett said, his voice neither high nor low, calm as if he were speaking about the weather. "I can see you. I've been able to for a long time." Ronan stepped back half a step. His eyes widened. He looked into Barrett's eyes and understood. Barrett wasn't blind. Barrett had never been blind, at least not during the time Ronan believed he was. Everything Curtis had reported was a lie. Everything Monica had said was wrong. And everything Ronan had built on the assumption that Barrett was finished had just collapsed right in front of him. Ronan turned, meaning to walk quickly toward the door. Pike and 2 of Barrett's men were already blocking the exit. The doors to the main hall opened. The police walked in. Ronan Shaw was handcuffed in front of Chicago's entire upper class. He said nothing. He didn't shout. He only looked at Barrett one last time before being led away. And in that look was something Ronan had never given anyone before, the admission that he had lost to a better man. At the same time, in the private room, Monica was arrested. She screamed and struggled, but the evidence from her own mouth had already been fully recorded. Wesley Grant was stopped on the highway while trying to flee to the airport, his car forced to a halt by 2 federal police cars. Curtis was arrested right at the Kensington mansion, where he was preparing to run with a bag of cash. 4 people. One night, the main hall stirred with noise. Guests looked at one another, whispering, some taking out their phones to record. But Barrett didn't look at the crowd. He didn't give a speech. He didn't explain. He didn't declare victory. He walked to his table in the corner of the room, sat down, picked up his glass of wine, and took a sip, calmly, as if nothing had just happened. Kira left Chicago 3 days after the gala. She didn't tell Barrett. She didn't leave a letter. She only told Mrs. Greta, "I need to go home." Then she bought a bus ticket to Detroit with the dishwashing wages she had saved from that night at the restaurant. For 4 hours on the bus, Kira looked out through the window and didn't sleep. She thought about Barrett sitting there calmly drinking wine after his whole world had collapsed and been rebuilt in a single night. She thought about the private room door closing behind her when Monica was arrested. She thought about Barrett's eyes when he removed the black glasses. Eyes that could see again but had never truly seen her clearly. And she thought about her father. About Detroit. When Kira walked into the house, Josie hugged her, and Patty stood in the kitchen doorway looking at her daughter with red eyes. Kira didn't tell them anything about the gala, about Monica, about Ronan Shaw. She only said, "I'm home." That night, Josie sat beside Kira on the bed, the way she had when they were little, and asked, "You're not staying in Chicago?" "No," Kira said. "He belongs to another world, Josie. Our father died because he got tangled up in the dark. I can't repeat that." Josie didn't ask anything else. She understood her sister well enough to know when not to push. Kira returned to her old life in Detroit. She found work at a laundromat near home. She woke up at 5 o'clock in the morning, went to work, came home, and cooked dinner for her mother and sister. Every day looked like every other day, but something was different. Before, Kira had lived for her family, for responsibility, for the debt, for Josie. Now the debt was gone, Josie was all right, and her mother was changing. And Kira discovered that when there was nothing left to carry, she didn't know what she was living for. 2 weeks later, an envelope arrived at the house. There was no sender's name. Inside was a full scholarship notice for Josie Dawson to enter the nursing program at a respected school in Michigan, and one small handwritten note, the letters slanting slightly. "This isn't meant to make you come back. This is because your sister deserves it. Whatever you choose, I respect it." No signature. No need for a signature. Kira held the note, read it over and over, then folded it small and tucked it into a drawer. She didn't call Barrett. She didn't send a thank you letter. She put that note away and kept living as if nothing had changed. But every night, before she went to sleep, she opened the drawer, looked at the note, then closed it again. 4 weeks passed. One night, Josie was sitting at the kitchen table studying with the new books from the scholarship. She looked up at Kira, who was washing dishes, and asked, "Sis, who sent me the scholarship?" "A good person," Kira said, without turning around. "Do you love that person?" Kira's hand stopped. The water was still running. She stood still, looking down at the bowl in her hand, and didn't answer. Josie was quiet for a while. Then she said softly, "Dad was afraid of everything in life. Afraid of being poor, afraid of debt, afraid of himself. But when Dad protected our family, he wasn't afraid of anything. Love makes people stop being afraid, sis." Josie turned back to her lesson. She didn't say anything more. She didn't push. She only said what she thought, then left her sister to decide for herself. Kira finished washing the last bowl, turned off the water, and dried her hands. She went into her room, opened the drawer, took out the note, and read it one last time. Then she placed the note on the table and went to sleep. The next morning, Kira woke up at 4 o'clock. She changed her clothes and wrote a small note for Josie. "I'm going to Chicago. Don't worry, I know what I'm doing." She walked to the nearest bus station, bought a ticket with her laundromat wages, and got on the bus. 4 hours later, Kira stood before the iron gate of the Kensington mansion. She didn't call ahead. She didn't tell anyone. She only stood there and waited. 10 minutes later, the gate opened. Barrett walked out. No black glasses, no one guiding him. He walked straight, his steps firm, and stopped a few paces from Kira. He looked at her. For the first time, he truly saw her. Not through a blur, not through shapes at close range, not through his fingers touching her face in a dark hallway. He saw her face clearly, her eyes, her features, all of her. And he stood still. He said nothing. He only looked. Kira looked back at him. Then she said, "I came back. Not because you need me, but because I choose to be here." Barrett still stood still. Then he smiled. For the first time in this whole story, Barrett Kensington smiled without calculation, without strategy, without any game behind it. Just a smile. 2 months after the gala, Barrett and Kira went to visit Monica in jail. Kira was the one who suggested it. Barrett didn't want to go, but Kira said, "You need to go. Not for her, for yourself. You can't begin a new life if you're still carrying old hatred with you." Barrett looked at her, stayed silent for a while, then nodded. They sat across from Monica at the visitation table. Monica looked completely different. No red lipstick, no designer clothes, no cold, contemptuous voice. She sat there, dark circles under her eyes, her hair tied neatly behind her, and she began to cry before she could say a single word. "Barrett," Monica said, her voice trembling, "I'm sorry. I know an apology isn't enough. I know what I did can't be fixed. But I want you to know, I regret it. Truly." "Where's Wesley?" Barrett asked. Monica lowered her face. "He abandoned me. The moment he was arrested, he confessed everything, blamed everything on me, then hired his own lawyer. Since the day I came in here, he hasn't called once, hasn't sent a single line, hasn't asked about me at all. I gave him everything, and he gave me back nothing." Barrett looked at Monica. The woman he had once loved, once trusted, once handed his whole life to. Now she sat across from him in prison clothes, abandoned by the very man she had betrayed him to follow. "I forgive you, Monica," Barrett said, "but not because you deserve it. Because I want myself to be free. I don't want to carry your bitterness through the rest of my life." Monica cried harder. She looked toward Kira, the woman sitting beside Barrett, the woman she had once thrown out into the street, once slapped, once locked in the basement. "Miss Kira," Monica said, her voice choking, "I owe you a bigger apology than anyone." Kira looked at Monica, and she remembered the night she had been thrown out of the mansion, remembered the iron gate closing behind her, remembered walking through the night with no money, no phone, no one. She could be angry. She had every right to be angry. But Kira looked at Monica, at her swollen red eyes and trembling hands, and saw a woman who had lost everything, just as Kira once had. "When you get out," Kira said, "live for yourself. Don't live on anyone else's money or power anymore. Live as yourself. That's the only thing no one can take from you." Monica nodded, tears running down her face, and said nothing more. Barrett stood. Kira stood. They left the visitation room, stepped outside, and neither of them looked back. That chapter was closed. 1 week later, Barrett took Kira back to Detroit to visit her family. He didn't take a luxury car. He rented an ordinary one, wore a simple jacket, and brought no bodyguards. When the car stopped in front of the Dawson family's small house, Barrett stepped out. looked at the house with its cracked cement steps and crooked wooden fence, and said nothing. He understood. He understood where Kira had come from, and he understood even more why she was so strong. Patty opened the door. She looked Barrett up and down, then looked at Kira, then looked back at Barrett. "This is Barrett, Mom," Kira said. "He's in the real estate business in Chicago." Patty didn't shake his hand. She didn't smile. She stood in the doorway, one hand on her hip, looking at Barrett with the kind of eyes only mothers have after watching their daughters suffer too much. "My daughter has suffered her whole life," Patty said, one word at a time. "If you make her cry, I don't care who you are, I'll find you." Barrett looked at Patty. Then he laughed. Not a strategic smile, not a social smile. It was the laugh of a man standing for the first time before a mother protecting her daughter, and feeling something warm he hadn't felt in a long time. "Ma'am, I believe you would," Barrett said. Patty looked at him for a few more seconds. Then she shifted aside, letting him step into the house. That was Patty Dawson's approval, and it was worth more than any contract Barrett had ever signed. That afternoon, Kira took Barrett to a cemetery on the outskirts of Detroit, where Frank Dawson was buried. Her father's grave was simple, a small stone marker, grass spreading around its base. Kira set the flowers down, knelt, and whispered, "Dad, I found someone who makes me not afraid anymore. I wish you could have met him." Barrett stood behind her, silent. Then he stepped beside Kira, knelt down with her, and took her hand. "He knows," Barrett said, "and I think he sent you to me." Kira didn't answer. She rested her head against Barrett's shoulder, looked at her father's gravestone, and for the first time since the day Frank died, she felt at peace. Not because everything was perfect, but because, at last, she wasn't walking alone anymore. 6 months later, on an autumn evening, Barrett took Kira up to the rooftop of the Kensington Holdings building, where the whole Chicago skyline stretched out before them. There was no party, no guests, only the two of them, the city below, and the sky above. Barrett stood facing Kira, held her hand, and said, "I lived in darkness for a very long time. You're the reason I want to open my eyes every morning. Kira Dawson, will you marry me?" Kira looked at him, at the man who had once thrown a glass of liquor against the wall the first time she stepped into his room. The man who had felt his way through the dark basement to find her. The man who had sat beside her bed all night even though his eyes couldn't see anything. The man who had sent Josie a scholarship without asking Kira to come back. "Then don't ever close your eyes," Kira said. Then she nodded. Barrett slipped the ring onto Kira's finger, and for the first time, he held her in his arms, in the Chicago wind, on top of the building he had almost lost, with the eyes he had almost never seen through again. Josie entered nursing school the following spring, just as she had dreamed since she was a little girl. Patty stopped shopping online, started selling homemade cakes, and for the first time in her life, she earned money with her own hands. Life wasn't perfect, but it was real. Barrett and Kira's story is a story about people knocked down by life, who refuse to stay down. Sometimes, the strongest person isn't the one who has never fallen, but the one who gets back up and chooses to believe in people again. True power doesn't lie in money or strength, but in the courage to love after being betrayed. And true kindness, even when it comes from the smallest hand, is powerful enough to change an entire empire. If this story touched you, please press like to support us, and share this video with someone you think needs to hear this story. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel to hear more compelling stories every day. How did this story make you feel? Please share the feelings from deep in your heart in the comment section below. We're always listening to every word you write. Wishing everyone watching this video good health, a joyful life, and peace each day. Goodbye, and see you again in the next video.